Hello and welcome to the University of Georgia School of Social Work, located here in the old Athens Factory. The Athens Factory was first built in 1832 here on the shores of the North Oconee River. The Athens Factory changed its name, or was known over time, as the Athens Factory, as the Athens Manufacturing Company, as the Athens Cotton and Wool Mill, and also as the Lower Mill. My name is Jane McPherson, and I'm very interested in the history of this mill. I use this work in my teaching and research here at the School of Social Work. My project, called Complex Cloth, weaves together these various histories of the School of Social Work, of the profession of social work in Athens, of the University of Georgia, and also the city of Athens. So, welcome. This Athens factory was built on Cedar Shoals, which is a rocky drop in the river that the Native Americans probably used as a river crossing. And it was also a really important early settlement in the place that would become Athens. A miller named Daniel Easley purchased the title to this land in 1796, and he set up several basic mills across the river from here for producing flour and animal feed and lumber, and some of the remnants can still be seen if you want to clamber down the hillside across the river. Getting to the point, in 1832, Augustine Clayton, William Deering, John Nisbet, and Abraham Walker bought 55 acres, straddling both sides of the river at Cedar Shoals for the purpose of building not just a basic mill, but a real factory for producing cloth out of cotton and wool. When the Athens factory opened its doors in 1833, it brought real industrial-scale thread and cloth manufacturing to the city of Athens, which continued something that had been happening. The very first mill locally was built down in Whitehall, but Whitehall, once upon a time, was considered to be very far away from Athens. It was the intention of the original investors to run the factory with enslaved labor. All of the original investors were enslavers, and they deploying labor in that way made sense to them. And they imagined that enslaved labor would do, as they said, as well, if not better, than whites. As much as we can tell, however, for the first 30 years or so of the factory's existence, both enslaved and free white laborers worked here. As one British traveler, wonderfully named James Silk Buckingham, described it when he visited in 1839, he said that each of the mills, by then there were 3, employed about 80 to 100 persons and an equal number white and black. In one of them, he wrote, "The blacks are the property of the mill owner, but in the other 2, they're the slaves of planters, hired out at monthly wages to work in the factory." He wrote, "There's no difficulty among them on account of color, with the white girls working in the same room and at the same loom with the black girls." And during the first years of the factory, the cloth produced here was quite rough, and it was often used to clothe enslaved people. George Cook's 1845 view of Athens from Carr's Hill depicts the mid-century manufacturing complex. You can see the factory buildings, the dam, the pond, and what appear to be worker lodgings, situated on the west bank of the North Oconee in what is now the School of Social Work's vast parking lot. And above the factory on the hill, you can see UGA. The chapel is plainly visible, as are New College and Old College. And 3 of the first 4 secretary-treasurers of UGA were, in fact, officers in the factory as well. Controlling the waters of the North Oconee was always a challenge, and factory floods were frequent. The factory sustained frequent damage, and local farmers whose lands were damaged by the rising mill pond tended to sue the factory pretty frequently. In 1857, the factory burnt nearly to the ground, and today's building opened for business in 1858. Robert Bloomfield was a garment seller who moved to Athens from New Jersey in 1850-ish and took over as agent of the factory during the early part of the Civil War. He was really the major human being in the factory up until 1900, when his business ambitions caused the company to have to reorganize. The company prospered during the Civil War with a huge amount of production of Civil War uniforms, tents, and all kinds of fabrics that were needed. And after the war, Bloomfield opened a flour mill in Daniel Easley's old spot, and then expanded into the abandoned Cook and Brother Confederate Armory, which is now UGA's Chicopee complex. Once production got moving at Chicopee, which was then called the Check Mill, this mill, what was then called the Lower Factory, the Athens Factory, focused on thread production. At this point, there was also a barge on the North Oconee that ran between the two mills, and Robert Shepard, who had been a former slave and was now emancipated, worked for Bloomfield in the 1870s and describes running the boat up the river in an interview recorded by the Federal Writers Project in the 1930s. Together, the two mills produced award-winning fabric. As you visit the mill, there are several sights you should see and details that are worth your notice. This 1885 plan of the factory shows the buildings that comprise the current School of Social Work inside the purple line. The other buildings have been lost to time. The building parallel to the river was used for wool carding and spinning, and the building perpendicular to it was used for cotton. The cotton picker house, the dye house, the warping room, lots of storage facilities, and many other structures are gone. As you walk through the building, please take time to notice the bricks. The original 1858 brick is made by hand, and you can sometimes see the imprints of the maker's hands and fingers. The bricks were almost certainly made by enslaved people nearby and brought to the factory for construction. And when you head out to the deck, please notice the mill race that controlled the flow of water into the factory. You may be lucky and see an old gear in the water or pulled up on the deck. And remnants of the 1840s dam are also visible just off the deck, still crossing the river. Finally, if you head up to the third floor, you'll find a floor full of faculty offices that was once a very open factory floor for milling cotton. If you're curious and you want to learn more, you can check out my website at complexcloth.org or follow me on Instagram at complexcloth1832.